Welcome to Shooting Straight with Brad and David. I'm Brad Carline, your Navajo County Attorney.
And I'm David Klaus, your Navajo County Sheriff.
And this is our November show, so we're going to talk about veterans, because Veterans Day is in November. And we have three guests who are all members, or past members of the military, and we want to talk about also our Veterans Court in Navajo County. Clint, can you start by just giving a quick introduction of yourself?
Yes, sir. I'm Clint Matheny. I've been employed with Navajo County Attorney's Office since 2014. And briefly background, I'm a member of the United States Army Reserve. I'm a captain in the JAG Corps and currently serving at Fort Sill in Oklahoma.
John.
John Beeler, I'm VFW Post 2364 in Pine Top Lakeside, a Korean War veteran and a Vietnam veteran, and been up here for 42 years, born and raised in Yuma.
Jack.
And I'm Jack Latham, U.S. Army vet, retired First Sergeant of the Infantry, retired in 1989, past city councilman in Show Low and on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Veteran Day is in November, and before we started, you've told me something about the number 11 that's important.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Well, the armistice was signed in France with Germany on the 11th hour, the 11th day, and the 11th month. So we all start our ceremonies at 11 o'clock on Veterans Day, which is November the 11th.
And what exactly is Veterans Day for?
Celebration of all the men and women that have served in our military from the Revolutionary War right through our current status, active duty, and retired people. I'm retired Air Force, and but Jack's retired. He's a young guy. I retired. I retired in 1971. So but that's what it's for. We celebrate all of the veterans and the Coast Guard, and now they've added. Well, the Space Force they've added, but we've never added a flag for the Space Force yet. So we're sort of waiting.
You know, my father-in-law is a Vietnam veteran. He served over there in the 60s, and you know, I guess maybe it's those generations, they don't really seek help, they kind of keep it in.
Yeah.
You guys have been involved with your VFWs and the American Legions. Do you see that with a lot of veterans who have served, especially in combat, and how that impacts them?
It's very prevalent in all the branches of the service. Doesn't make it ever. If you served in a combat zone, you don't talk about it. I don't talk about it very much. My wife, I was married when I went into service in '51, and we just never discussed it with my wife. You know, we understood the hazards of what we do. Doesn't make it matter what branch of service it is, but it's still that we were there to serve our country and serve our state, wherever we were from, and that was what we did. And so we don't talk about it. And there's a lot of them that still don't talk about it. We've got a lot of Vietnam veterans at our post, and I know Jack does here in 9907, and they won't talk, and they don't ask for help very much either. I mean, some of them, you just practically got to force it on them for us to help them.
So Jack, how do you see that inability to either ask for help or to express, manifest themselves in some of the people that you've worked with?
You know, everybody's different, but most men, anyway, take it as a sign of weakness to ask for help. And so they have this stuff in them that's eating away at them, and nobody knows it until sometimes it's too late.
Right.
You know, I know talking to some people in the VFW, like Terry Hill and all, and he used to tell me that one of the reasons he would go and was so involved is so when somebody was ready to talk, he was there for them.
Yeah. No.
And
That's
I assume
very true.
the two of you do that too.
Sure.
So how do you help them when they're ready to share some of the burden they still carry around?
Biggest thing to do is listen.
Listen to them.
Don't try to cure it, because you can't.
No.
Just listen. Let them talk.
Listen and give them moral and physical support.
Yeah.
And the family, if the family's having trouble too. And the families are a very important part of this whole whole conversation, because the women, or if it's a woman in the service, a man, they're the stay-at-home family taking care of the kids while the guy's overseas in combat, and he brings a lot of that back with him, so they suffer too with what he's brought back from the war zone. And so it's a family thing. You know, like Jack said, you've got to let them come to you most of the time, and they'll eventually come around to it, because it's happened in our post. Because our post was started in '85, and I was started in '85 with the post. And so I've seen a lot of World War II Korean and stuff like that, and that's what it is. A lot of times they'll eventually, after you may know them 10 years or 15, and then as you build a relationship with them and their family, then they may start talking to you, and that's when you let them talk and get it out of their system, and just bare their soul, basically, back. And it's a generational thing, because I was born in the early 30s, and I grew up in World War II, and that generation, my dad's generation and his dad, I mean, it was all hard work, no crying, no whining. You just got out and did the job, and that's the way we did it in the military. You just did the job.
Do you see younger generation, do you talk about generations, younger generation of veterans that are willing to talk sooner, or they talk more often? Because we see a lot of the same similarities in law enforcement.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people because just like in the service, you're called to help people. You're called to serve. Right. A lot of our law enforcement folks, they solve people's problems, or they get called to
especially
render aid.
Domestic violence.
And they hold it in.
Right.
But when the guys get together, or guys and gals get together,
No.
we talk a little bit. But the younger seem to be a little more open to speak. I didn't know if that was happening with veterans or.
I don't know. The Iraq and Afghanistan people, the suicide rate is up pretty high with the Afghan and people,
they're not
because
talking.
of the environment they were in over in the sand, and so it's a little different with them. But they still really don't talk a lot about it. I mean,
I think it's the
just that thing that's built into you from the military.
exactly.
Society's definition of what a man is.
Well,
they handle it.
you know.
But unfortunately, we don't always handle it well.
Oh, I know that.
And David and his deputies and Clint and the
Oh,
other
sure.
prosecutors, we end up seeing people who self-medicate with alcohol or drugs,
Exactly.
or they explode
Right.
with that anger that's built up
Right.
inside and do something that brings them into the criminal justice system.
Now that's the bad. Well, that's what's so great about the Veterans Court.
And
It is
that's-
a tremendous asset to Navajo County and our veterans.
And my hat's off to both of you,
Oh,
all
yeah.
three of you actually, for getting that going. And
Well, I think we should actually tip our hat to the two of you and to Terry Hill, because
Oh, yeah.
you dogged Navajo County
I
and the
know.
players in the criminal justice system to get it done, and you did it for a couple years before we actually managed to do
No,
it.
but
you
it was.
did it, and the
it's great.
sheriff is, assuming you still have a veterans pod.
Yeah.
Last I checked on it, it wasn't very well used, which is good. That means there wasn't anybody to put in it, so that's good at the jail.
Yeah.
So,
To explain what Veterans Court is, I'm going to turn to you, Clint, because you're the prosecutor assigned to Veterans Court. You know, give us an overview of how somebody gets in and how it's different and how they're treated differently than maybe the other parts of our criminal justice system.
Absolutely. So Veterans Court is a tool of probation currently, where a veteran is convicted of a crime. They participate in Veterans Court as a term of their probation. They have to choose to do that. You have to want to be there. But participation requires them to attend a monthly meeting. We have Judge Clark, he's a military veteran as well. Myself, and then these gentlemen and a number of other people are present to offer help and assistance and various services with housing, employment. We have a social worker from the Department of Veteran Affairs who attends telephonically, and she can assist with other services through the VA. And it's an opportunity, one, for them to reclaim valor, because it's shaming when you do something wrong. And they're in a room with other similarly situated veterans, and it helps instill some of that structure that is missing from their life, that was part of their life while they were in the military. And I know a lot of service members struggle with kind of the lack of structure of civilian life, and that's a piece of it too. So it's an opportunity for them to, when they graduate, we've had a couple graduate and since I took over, and a few more that are scheduled to graduate. When that happens, their conviction is set aside. So it's an opportunity for them to move forward.
What does set aside mean? Many people might not understand what that means.
So essentially, the conviction is, depending on who is looking into your background, they might still be able to see what took place, but it removes the felony conviction from your criminal record so that you don't have to check that box when you're applying to jobs and that sort of thing.
And I think one thing that's important to a lot of them that I've talked to is they get their voting rights back and they get their gun rights back. And that's important to a veteran. You know, I mean, just think of what we've gone through as veterans for this country. And then you commit a crime and, you know, probably, and it's because of your service. And then for the court and the county attorney and to be able to get those rights back means an awful lot to the ones that I've talked to that have graduated. That's the first thing they do after they have the cake and punch and stuff there in the courthouse where the judge furnishes, is they're heading out the door and they say, I'm going to start filling out the paperwork to get my gun rights back and get my voting rights back. Because it's really an important factor, I think, in the overall system that the county is doing for veterans.
But actually, from my perspective, one of the greatest assets of the Navajo County Veterans Court are people like yourself and other VFW and American Legion members.
Right.
We're a relatively poor county, and we're running our Veterans Court on a shoestring. We don't have enough probation officers to go around and help, but as volunteers such as yourself that show up every month, they're in support of those people in the Veterans Court. You're there to make sure they get to the court. You make sure they get to their VA services, that they have services they're taking advantage of, and probably most importantly, you're an ear.
Right.
Somebody who's walked in their shoes,
Right.
who can understand what they've been through, and say, and it's you talked about earlier, Jack, just listen, but they know you get it.
No, you're very right. That's an important thing that means a lot to us. And I know Jack and I and Terry and our commander, George Baum, lives here in Show, and he's on the court. And I'm a lifetime member of American Legion Post 60 in White River, and I belonged down there since 1986. So I represent them too at the court, even though I don't wear a American Legion hat. I've got it in the pickup, but it's just the fact that they're represented too, and the VFW, and it's just that's our mission, really. I mean, we don't get paid, Jack and I and George and Terry, we don't get a dime for what we do.
Well,
we do it out for the love of our veterans and and our veterans' families.
And you're continuing your service to your country
That's
and your
right.
fellow man
Absolutely.
and woman, and we
And we're doing it
appreciate
at
that.
county level or town level.
We
One of-
really believe in that saying, except for the grace of God, there
Yeah,
go I.
Go I,
You
yeah.
know, we were fortunate enough to where it didn't hit us.
Yeah.
But everybody's different.
I don't know John as well as I know you, Jack, or Terry, but I also know that you and Terry had wonderful wives that I think helped
That's
you through
what I was
that.
getting ready to say.
Okay.
If it wasn't for, well, I was married when I went in, and I had 4 children. My wife had 4 children while we were in. If it wasn't for that family structure that I came back to every time I was gone for 60 days or 90 days or a year, you're going back into an environment that's everybody loves each other, and it meant the world to me. And I think that's probably why I haven't had problems like a lot of the other veterans have had that were single and only mom and dad was home or grandpa, and they didn't have that family structure to go back into and continue with.
And I can speak for the Army and for myself. And my wife, her dad was a Green Beret. He retired from the Army. He was a commissioned officer 3 months before we got married in 1971. So I was fortunate. I was a sergeant when I got married. My wife had had an ID card since she was 10. We were at Fort Bragg, and she knew what she was getting into.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys go home on leave right after basic training and get married, and it lasts 6 months.
Right.
You know, so they're fighting stuff then.
While you've been able to deal with your own issues that may have come from your
Sure.
service, do you think helping others and listening to them and sharing your experience helps you too?
Oh, I think it helps everybody. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it does me, because we all go through that up and down thing. At least I do. I mean, you know, you're up, and then all of a sudden something comes up in your life and you go down. And you're there for a while, but the family members help you and talk to you about it, and then you go back up again. And that's why I think in Veterans Court we see some of the young veterans, very young veterans that we have, that their marriages are broke up, or if they have boyfriend, girlfriend, they're fighting or having problems like that. So they've come out of the service, and it's one heck of a letdown from spending, like me and Jack. I spent 20 years in the Air Force, and then all of a sudden you're retired. Well, what do I do now? For 20 years I've been
That's your
saluting
life,
and
yeah.
wearing the uniform, and now I'm wearing civilian clothes.
I'm sorry. The Army, what I was going to say a minute ago and forgot to, during Vietnam, unless you were in the initial groups that went over as units, you went over individually, you came back,
And they kicked you out.
and you were out on your own by yourself. The Army's learned, and now they transfer as units. So when you come back, you're surrounded by the people you were there with.
You
and
have
I
that
think that's
support group.
very
It's your support
beneficial.
group. My
What you
son-
guys are doing back home in civilian life.
yeah.
with-
Through your VFWs.
yeah.
Right.
Clint, in the Veterans Court, how integral do you think it is for the rehabilitation, people like Jack and John and the others that are there to help them?
We could not have Veterans Court without their support. There's no question. Certainly, my function as a prosecutor, you know, your mandate to me when I started the job was to do the right thing, and Veterans Court is certainly an extension of that, but I can't fill the same role that these gentlemen do, and they're being part of Veterans Court. Certainly, it provides a level of support outside of the criminal justice system that really, I think, enables rehabilitation. It's crucial.
Yeah, between people like John and Jack and the VA benefits that they can
Right.
take advantage of, there's so many more resources that
Right,
we can
available.
do to help these people. And unfortunately, time has flown.
Oh, we're at 0 already.
We've been at 0 for a while. I want to thank you, gentlemen,
Thank you.
for helping us to understand more about what veterans go through in Veterans Court and what the VFW and American Legion does.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for joining us this month for Shooting Straight with Brad and David. And please stay tuned for this month's Most Wanted.
Derek Angelo Austin has a valid and confirmed felony warrant for probation violation on the original charges of endangerment and extreme DUI. Derek's last known address was Flagstaff, Arizona, but is known to frequent the Winslow area. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Derek, please call Navajo County Communications Center at 928-524-4050. Or to remain anonymous, please call WeTip at 1-800-78-CRIME.